dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or savor a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, we return to Winephabet Street, where the letter of the day is G, and it stands for Graciano. Our guest sponsor for the episode is Jada Vineyards, and our special guest is the one and only Josh Harp. This is the third time on the podcast, and he continues to be a wealth of information. Graciano is popular in Navarra and Rioja regions of Spain. It found its way to California, and although not the most popular grape variety, it is relatively quite a bit in Paso Robles. There were 280 tons crushed in 2021, which may not sound like a lot, but considering there were only 980 tons crushed across all of California, that equates to 29% of the entire state. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Did you know that you can do it right now, literally, while you are listening? New ratings and reviews are how the algorithms decide which podcast they recommend to others. And if you love the podcast, other wine lovers will too. And don't forget to add your email address to our newsletter list on the website to keep up to date on all things exploring the wine glass. Now, hope you enjoy Graciano. Ancha.
Give me the blanche, the wine. Give me the white wine.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, Spanish wine scholar, sommelier service, champagne and Côte d'Aron specialist, and a WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. Stay in the know about all things wine by visiting my website, exploringthewineglass.com. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass.
Right into wine, so you and I can feel the...
Hello.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Happy early Thanksgiving if you are watching this live. And we are back to Winephabet Street, and we are here with the letter G. So we took a month off because, well, it was harvest and it's tough to get winemakers during harvest. So we took our month off, but we are here with Josh Harp of Jada Vineyard in Paso, and we are going to be talking Graciano today. So hello, Josh.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And for those of you who might be new, I am your co-host, Lori. I'm WSET Level 2, Spanish wine scholar, champagne specialist, Côte d'Aron, and owner of Dracaena Wines. And my co-host, Deb.
I am Debbie Giaquindo. I'm a certified specialist of wine, a wine location specialist in port and champagne, and a wine certified sherry wine specialist. I am known as the Hudson Valley Wine Goddess. I am the author of the book, Tapping the Hudson Valley, Day Trips and Weekend Itineraries, Visiting the Hudson Valley Wine Region. And I'm partner in a restaurant in North Wildwood, New Jersey called Trio North Wildwood. And we're open until New Year's Eve, and we'll be closed January, February, and March, and then open again in April. And I think that's it.
All right. Busy.
Yes.
And our guest, Josh, my third time speaking with you on the podcast. So welcome back. Can you give us a little brief bio of yourself?
Of course, third time's a charm.
Yeah.
I don't have any of those certifications, first of all, but
You're a winemaker, so
I am a winemaker. I've been in the Paso Robles wine region since 2010. Been making the wines here at Jada since 2017. We focus mostly on Rhone and Bordeaux varieties, but we also have varieties like Graciano on the property.
Awesome. So before we get into the actual interview and before I get to drink, or we get to drink, we're going to have a little chat with Elmo. Well, we are now official, so that means it's time to raise a glass.
Cheers.
Slancha.
Cheers.
It's going to be a big week of drinking wine.
It is. And this is a great wine to be leading off the week with. So this is a 2019 Hell's Kitchen from Jada Vineyard. And so good. Just so good.
So Josh, tell us a little bit about Jada, the history of the winery.
Yeah, absolutely. Jada was founded by the Messina family, who are of Sicilian ancestry. Jack Messina, the father of the who was the founder, his parents immigrated from, his father immigrated from Sicily to the Hell's Kitchen portion of New York, which is actually relevant to this discussion because this is the wine we're tasting today. It's our Hell's Kitchen. And Jack Messina is a retired cardiovascular surgeon and has always had wine in the family. Came over to Paso Robles to see if he could find some property to plant some grapes, and fell in love with this piece of property that was originally planted to barley, and so planted this vineyard in 1999 through 2002, and we just and here we are today. So. Again, I see that I actually started at this winery in 2015, working under the former winemaker David Graciano. And when he headed back up north to St. Helena, I took over in 2017. I've told the story a little bit to Lori in the past, but we've worked with several consulting winemakers and viticulturists over the years. But in 17, I was working with about 4 of them who were partially there to get Jada to where we wanted to be from a quality perspective and from a farming perspective. But they were also partially there to make sure that I could take the job over properly and not mess anything up. So luckily, I can say I'm still here.
You did a stellar job.
Yeah.
Thank you. And in fact, we did. We're very excited with that first vintage, 2017, and we've just been learning more and more about the grapes. That it's amazing. Even though some of these vines are over 20 years old now, we're still learning a lot from them, especially Graciano.
And now, you guys are located in Willow Creek.
We are,
right?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. I was just to say, one of the 11 sub AVAs at Paso Robles, and one of the most westernmost AVAs. So we get a lot more of that coastal influence, and then also we're a little bit more higher elevation, a little bit more in the mountain region as well.
Now, not that winemakers have a lot of spare time, but there are those few weeks in between when we're waiting to prune and things like that. So what do you like to do in your spare time?
Gosh, it depends on who you ask. If you ask my fiance, she'll say wine is my pastime. Yeah. So I do. You know how it is. We spend a long time thinking and working, and I love winemaking. It really is something that I spend a lot of time learning about. That being said, we just got back from the Sequoias. I love going up and hiking and exploring. California has a lot to offer, especially for hiking and exploration. I love just being outdoors, and whether it's tennis or golf or whatever, I'll do it. I'm happy. I'm happy out in the sun.
All right. I'm with you. I'll do tennis. I don't do golf. I'm not a fan of golf. If there's a puddle this big, I'll find it. My ball will find it.
Golf is fun but frustrating.
Yeah, I say I like golf, but that doesn't mean I'm good at any of the things.
No. I'm lucky I can hit the ball and it doesn't fall right in front of me.
Exactly. If I can do that, I'm happy. It's all about getting out there, and then also maybe the beverage that you bring along with you as well is important.
As you round that 9th hole, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, my husband golfs, and we do not golf together anymore. But what happened was I'm up, I would tee off or whatever, and he would yell at me, no, do this. And I would keep saying to him, I don't think my body goes that way. Like, I don't think my body can do what you want it to do. And he was like, well, just do it. Yes, it does. Just do it. Stop complaining doing it. So I did it. And it was the best shot I have ever taken. He's sitting there and he's like, oh my God, look, see, it's awesome. I was on the ground, and that was my 4th knee surgery that I needed.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch,
Yeah.
ouch, ouch.
So you knew.
I told you. I told you my body doesn't do that. But it was a spectacular shot. It was.
Yeah, well, it was worth it, maybe.
Maybe not.
Oh, that's funny.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Deb.
So at Jada, how many cases of wine do you produce? Does the winery produce? How big is it?
Good question. We're not too big, so we actually have about 60. It depends. We've been pulling some vines out and replanting over the years. So we've been between 45 and 50 acres planted on our estate vineyard. We were recently acquired by the Ribole family, a group of wines. So I now have access to some other really awesome vineyards that are, including one that's just completely chalk. So we're looking forward to working with some new properties. But that being said, we're still only about 3,000 cases produced every year. We're working our way up, but we're trying to be very careful about how we increase our production. Most of our wine sales are through the tasting room, and we do a little bit of distribution, but it's very specific. It's geared towards placements in restaurants, mostly in specific wine shops, just to sort of get the wine out there and in front of a larger group of people. But it's very important to us that we're offering the same quality to our wine club members and to our customers that come to the tasting room. So we're increasing our production slightly over, I would say, over a 4 or 5 year period. I don't think we'll be seeing a whole lot more than 5,000 if we are really ambitious.
So you had mentioned that you pulled out some vines and replanted. What did you pull out and what did you replant with?
We've pulled out early on, was sadly some of our first vines that we pulled out were Grenache Blanc and Roussanne. Those had a lot of leaf roll and red blotch and a lot of other diseases that just they weren't getting into the sugar levels we were looking for, and just weren't giving us good flavor. So those had to come out. We've also pulled out some blocks of Mourvedre, and let's see what else we pulled. Cab Franc was another one that just it can be quite difficult. I've seen Lori's, it can be quite difficult. So and it's when it works, it's amazing. But sometimes it
has to work, right?
It has to work, right? And it sometimes it's a clone thing. Sometimes it's a soil thing. In our case, I think it was probably more clone related because there is some Cab Franc that does work well here. I've had some good examples of it. We're putting back in. What we're trying to do is really go at it with a focus on soil type and also aspects and elevation. So where, for example, where we would have one hillside. Let's say it's most of our vines or all of our vines are the row directions is northeast to southwest row direction. Okay. But we've got aspects, most of it's southwest aspects. But we also have some more north or even flat regions on our property as well. Because our elevation is about 300 feet difference between our lowest section and our highest section. So lots of rolling hills, just to give you a little picture, lots of rolling hills, and then different heights and different soil types across those hills. And in the past, we've found that we'll have, let's say, one big hill where the top is mostly exposed, rocky, calcareous soil, really thin and shallower rooting possibilities. And then down at the bottom, where you can imagine a lot of that over thousands and thousands of years, the soil is sort of sloughed off, and so we're seeing a lot of that top soil and top surface layers down at the settling down at the bottom. So we're seeing deeper, more clay loam at the bottom. So we're really focusing on maybe planting maybe the top of a hill separately and distinctly from the bottom. And a lot of what we're trying to do is Syrah, Graciano is another one that we're putting in a lot at the top because it can handle a little bit more heat. And then Cabernet or Merlot at the bottom. And maybe a little bit of Syrah as well, just to give us some variety in temperature and soil type.
You don't have any whites?
We used to have some Viognier, and that was, unfortunately, that was one of the last ones we had to pull out. Thankfully, we do have access to some Viognier off of some of the new properties we're working with. We do plan to put in some new whites, but we're debating what to do just because I love Viognier, but there's also the potential for some other maybe Spanish or Portuguese varieties that might work really well on this property. So we're debating. You know, we're trying to be very careful about what we're going to put in, and something that's going to be a long term. You know, as we would all hope these vines would be, but a long term plan, and hopefully plan for any climate changes that we should be expecting in the future. So that's very important to us as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, I had one sip, but I want more.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Hell's Kitchen. So if you can go into, before we go into the actual wine itself, you know, you talked about the Hell's Kitchen, but you know what, you have to talk about my other favorite wine and the reason why these names are the way they are. So.
Oh yeah, because we have the Jersey girl as well, right? Yeah. Yes, exactly. So again, I'm
a New Yorker. I just live in Jersey.
Yeah. I love that. So the Hell's Kitchen is I love the. I have to admit I've never visited Hell's Kitchen, but I've learned a little bit over the years, and from what I've from people I've talked to, we have a lot of people who come here from who've either grew up around that area or who work in that area who are like, oh my gosh, I mean, I didn't know you guys made this wine. I really like thinking of this, especially since the Jack Messina's father immigrated into Hell's Kitchen. It's kind of like the melting pot of our wines. It's where we bring together a lot of different varieties that sometimes don't play nicely, sometimes play exceptionally well, and you have to find that right balance. And they all bring their own personalities, and so it's one of the most challenging wines to blend, but it's definitely one of the most rewarding. We call it our GSM, but I think our GSM style, but we're trying to move away from that as we are educating our customers, because we have Graciano, and we use using that Graciano in place of Mourvedre, which we do not have on the property. And so, but GSG or this is SGG doesn't quite have the same ring. So for us, it's more of like a Rhone style blend, but again, it's really its own thing. So that we're trying to achieve. And then just to touch on what Lori was, we have our Jersey Girl as well, which is our Syrah offering. But we do a Côte Rôtie style co-fermentation on one of the components for that wine every year. So we actually typically we have one clone of a Syrah on the property that ripens a little bit earlier than all of the other clones that we're working with. And so we're able to catch that Viognier as it's kind of towards the end of its, hang time out in the vineyard. And we'll pull that off, co-ferment them together at sometimes 80% Syrah, 20% Viognier. And then we'll blend in other clones of Syrah and sometimes a little bit of Graciano as well, and bring that Viognier percentage down to about 5%, which I think is just a sweet spot for us here at Jada. So still very much there, but it's not trying to dominate the Syrah, and just shows really nicely. But again, I won't. I know Lori and I have talked a little bit in the past.
We're going to go back to Hell's Kitchen. I love Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
I love the wine Hell's Kitchen, but I also love Hell's Kitchen. It is a phenomenal place just to like walk around and experience New York. It is an incredible place to just, I think it's got a big heart of New York is there.
Yeah.
Right.
So obviously they lived in Jersey.
What was it? Jack Messina and his children grew up not in the Hell's Kitchen area. I think it was Amherst, Amherst, New York. So in New York,
Buffalo.
Yeah,
is that where?
Newark.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they moved out of that area, the Hell's Kitchen area, over to there, and that's kind of where the family later on grew up. And then Jack Messina met his wife, who was a Jersey girl.
Okay,
and so the Jersey girl is
for her.
homage to her.
That's what I thought it was. Yeah, the wife. Yeah.
Someone came from Jersey.
Somebody came from Jersey.
Yeah.
So back to Hell's Kitchen. How much Graciano? What's the percentage of this in this vintage? Because I know, right, it changes from vintage to vintage.
It does change from vintage to vintage, and this is 17% in this vintage, the 2019 that we're tasting today. Often the Graciano and the Grenache will kind of switch places, and depending on which one's dominant. We do a lot of co-fermentations. It's something I believe deeply in doing. We're spending a lot of time in the vineyard and seeing what's ripening and where, what sections are ripening in the vineyard, and seeing if there's anywhere that we can maybe play a little bit and ferment these varieties together. So often there's really just no way that we can plan these percentages, that a goal percentage, because we are doing so many co-fermentations, and a lot of them are made quickly in the vineyard with no real numbers in mind. More just, I think this is going to work. These are tasting really nice. So an example is we'll do let's say like 80% Syrah, 20% Graciano, and sometimes we'll do 60% Syrah and 40% Graciano as a co-fermentation. And then we'll start blending all these together. And the idea is I like to have a little bit more Syrah dominating this wine. But the goal is, how can I have all three of those varieties still show through and be representative in this wine, especially Grenache, because I love Grenache as well. And so I think it's really important not to mask any of those wines.
So on the nose, this is extremely dark fruit to me. And
yes.
we were joking earlier before coming on about Thanksgiving table, but oh my God, this would be phenomenal on a Thanksgiving table.
Yeah. And I think this year, especially, and I'm sure we'll talk more about how tannins are playing, especially with the Graciano. Mm-hmm. But this is just one of the most luscious Hell's Kitchens that we've made. I mean, there's just really no rough edges anymore. Any of that has worked out in bottle over the last year or two, or a year, I should say. And I think this is it's going to pair really well with anything you throw at it.
Yeah, it's like I say, very dark fruit. It's got that we had talked about this previously, the like baking spice concept of it. And on the palate, it's actually kind of a rather full-bodied wine, and the tannins like dance on your tongue. When you first taste it, the tannins are there, but they start to kind of break down nicely so that the finish lingers, but you don't have that drying effect that tannins can provide.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we're always looking for that weight, that viscosity on the mid palate. It's probably one of the biggest signals that I use while myself and the assistant winemaker were blending through these wines. If there's mid palate missing, that's when we start trying to bring in the spice dish and see. Because for me, that's one of the most important subconscious signals that maybe it's not going to be quite as full or have that lasting, as you're saying, lasting tannin profile. So yeah, that's something where we're focusing on big time. And a lot of that is coming from the ability that we have to co-ferment our Syrah with Graciano. Because as you know, Syrah can be very, very tannic if you leave it on the skins too long, depending on the vintage. Sometimes we're doing a little bit of whole cluster, so that's going to add some tannin as well. And when we throw Graciano in there, it brings that tannin level down. It's contributing a lot of color on its own, which is polymerizing and creating this just amazing co-fermentation effect, where you get that mouthfeel, that viscosity, but you don't get the drying tannin on the finish. And we love using it in that manner.
And these aromas is that more of the Graciano? Because Grenache to me is more, I always get a floral essence to it.
Right.
And this is a much deeper. I don't have that floral thing. So is this more of that Graciano taking?
Yeah, exactly. No, we the Grenache we use for the Hell's Kitchen really is usually more that candied red fruit and a little bit more floral, like you're saying. So that's just to help lift the aromatics up a little bit and support the other two varieties. But yeah, no, I think you nailed it. It's, the Syrah that we're using for this predominantly is also not an extremely dark or peppery fruit. It's a little bit more on the red side. When we add that Graciano and especially that whole cluster, it's adding just this wave of pepperiness, some earthy characteristics. And as we age this, it gets a little bit more meaty, a little bit more leathery. And it kind of, when we co-ferment them, it sort of takes the place of what we know of some Syrahs. And but we're able to do that with some Syrah clones that are a little bit more that lend themselves well to this co-fermentation, allow that Graciano to show through a little bit more.
So since Graciano can be very intense, and it's, you use it in a blend, is it bottled as a single varietal?
We only have just over an acre, and it's never enough. We actually just planted some more Graciano, so it'll be in a different clone as well, which I'm excited to try. So there's been years we've been tempted to do 100% Graciano. I love it. I think it can be very polarizing, and the only reason I can say that is our particular clone that we have on the property tends to be a little bit more colorful and not very tannic, which is kind of the holy grail when it comes to grapes for winemaking. There's very few grapes out there that give you that every year. Normally with color comes great tannin and great responsibility as well. So in our case, we've let these wines, or we've let it sit on skins in tank for over 30 days, and it will never be too tannic. And so we're actually finding our perfect kind of balance between extended maceration and also where we start to lose maybe some varietal characteristic and some freshness. So we'll let it sit as long as it needs to sit, and again, it'll never be too tannic. It'll actually be a little bit too much on the soft side for me, for my preference, where you're kind of hoping that there's a little bit more structure and a little bit more roundness on the palate, which again makes it a fantastic co-fermenter or blender, down the road if you need to soften the wine up a little bit. And then from a flavor perspective, we've seen the wine be very much on the black pepper side, and the dark red to black fruit quality, all the way to where there's this characteristic of almost like a cayenne pepper characteristic to it. Something I've never smelled or tasted on any other variety off of this property. And unfortunately, as winemakers, we have to weigh whether that's appealing to us or appealing to everybody.
Right.
And I would love it, but we'd probably only be able to bottle, maybe 20 cases of it for ourselves, because most people, it's a lot to take in all at once. So, yeah.
So the Graciano grape it's grown in Navarra and Rioja regions of Spain. And from what I read, that's kind of where it originated. How did it get to California?
And now, a word from our sponsor.
Bright light city, gonna set my soul, gonna set my soul.
Did you know that Dracaena Wines has a wine club? We named it the Chalk Club. Draco is on our label, but Vegas was getting a bit jealous, so we decided he deserved to be our wine club spokesdog. In Las Vegas, betting chalk means that you are betting on all of the favorites, and we're gambling that once you taste our wines, we will become one of your favorite wineries. The club is simple, yet a bit different than most. We don't ask for a lot of commitment like others do. Choose between 3 tiers. The Sweet 16, where you'll receive 3 bottles twice a year and get 25% off all orders. Sign up for the Elite 8 and get 30% off all orders and receive 4 bottles twice a year. Or make it to the Final 4 and receive 6 bottles twice a year, as well as receiving 35% off all purchases. All tiers receive discounted shipping, are customizable, and are eligible for unlimited referral bonuses. Add $15 to your bank for each person you refer. Head to www.dracenawines.com or the link in the show notes to find out all the Chalk Club has to offer and to sign up. We've stocked the odds so that you can get our award-winning wines without breaking the bank.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest importers, I think I'm not sure who else is bringing it in, but I know Sunridge Nurseries is one of the first licensed licensed propagator for Graciano,
Okay.
which is, and they're the nursery that brought in that 571 Monastrell clone that we have here on the property, and that a lot of others have in the area as well. So we can talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll get there.
It sounds like you guys like the Spanish varieties on your property. You like?
I think Tempranillo, well, again, it comes down to you only have so much square footage, and we would love to plant so many different varieties. But what we've had to focus on, maybe trying different clones of, for example, Syrah. But I know Tempranillo would work really well on this property. We don't have Tempranillo, unfortunately, but we're starting to work with it from some different properties. And but yeah, and then also some Italian and Portuguese varieties would probably work really well here also. And I think, again, as we're moving, as the climate's changing a little bit more, and we're seeing a little bit more heat, I think the Willow Creek district is perfectly suited in its location here in the Paso Robles AVA to handle some more heat in the years to come, and be able to grow some of those Spanish varieties really well.
So before we get back to Graciano, we have Karen who sent in a question. She said that she looked up Jada, and she said that she read that you are biodynamically farmed and have a gravity flow building. So can you go a little bit more in depth about what that is and what that means to your winemaking style?
Sure. So I have to say we were biodynamically farmed. We're no longer biodynamically farmed, but I can say that we've learned a lot since practicing biodynamics in the vineyard. We're now certified organic as of this year. We've been practicing while we were practicing biodynamic farming. We were also practicing, therefore, organic farming as well, and using mostly organic principles and throwing in some biodynamic farming practices on top as we were learning how to use them. So we've actually been farming organically 100% since 2014 now, and then decided that we would go ahead and go for certification this year. So I can happily say that we're doing that. Yeah, biodynamic farming is like a whole other conversation.
It is.
You know? And there's a lot to get into, but I can say that what I have learned from biodynamic farming has been it's very, very important to get out there in the vineyard and have a large attention to detail on how your practices are not only affecting the vine but also affecting the ecological health of everything else around it. So we've really put a lot of focus on making sure that we have healthy soils, healthy riparian areas surrounding the vineyard, and I think we've seen great benefits from that. Just maybe it's a little bit how do you say it? We're kind of seeing what I want to see, but when you look out in there in vineyard after practicing these biodynamic and organic farming, everything looks a little bit greener, and there's more insects in the air, and there's more animals running around the vineyard. So we have healthy populations of all kinds of birds, and of course also our favorite gophers and squirrels, because they love it too.
I was gonna say, you don't hear too many winemakers say favorite gophers.
Yeah. I've come up with this theory, and I'm hoping that it will prove true in some way at some point in the future, just so that I can so I can be right, because so we only trap gophers. We don't use any poisons or anything like that, because again, we are practicing organic farming. And but one thing you notice with gophers is, yes, they make holes in the ground all over the place, but they're also allowing moisture penetration when it rains down into the soil. You're also seeing the soil get turned over without the use of any disking or any ripping or anything like that. So for vines that are mature and have healthy root systems, I would say, I wonder if there's some positive effects from having gophers in the vineyard, not completely eliminating them necessarily. And also they're fertilizing, right? They're fertilizing the ground. True. They're pulling the weeds underneath, and there's been many days where I've just been sitting out in the vineyard, and I watch a radish that we've planted, in our cover crop, just go thunk into the ground like in the Looney Tunes. So it's really a fascinating cycle that you get to observe out there when you're paying a little bit more attention.
That's it. Absolutely. And all right, so I'm going to get a little geeky now, or I'm going to ask you to get a little geeky. Perfect. And so how does Graciano grow in the vineyard? Are we early ripening, late ripening? What's that fruit set like? And the dreadful flowering, period like.
Yeah. And again, I can speak for our vineyard specifically, and then a little bit more broadly. But in general, it's more mid to late bud break. So that's it's one of the last varieties on the vineyard to push, I think, in the vineyard. So it's probably one of the last ones. And it's not in a cool spot either. It's actually on one of the higher areas, but one of the flatter areas of our vineyard, in a mixture of calcareous and clay loam soil. So I would say at that point you can say pretty confidently that it's a later bud break, and it's also mid to late as far as the harvest period goes as well. So I think it's a good example of a variety that can handle a little bit more of the heat, because it's not super late, but it's also not super early as well. For us, we tends to be on a pretty vigorous, actually, surprisingly vigorous. It is on 1103P rootstock, which is a vigorous rootstock. But even in really dry years where we're not giving it a lot of water, there tends to be really healthy wood and good canopy, which I think is really important for protecting the fruit, because even though it can handle a little bit more intense heat, the berries can be pretty small, and those will burn pretty quickly in the direct sun. So we tend to see really good fruit set and good yields every year, regardless of whether it's a wet year or more of a drought year like we're experiencing now. And I'm not sure what, I think it has just a great kind of natural protection for, that we see a lot of color, so it's really reacting to the sun. And by being fairly healthy and vigorous, and larger canopy, larger leaf as well, it's protecting that fruit pretty well as well during the heat spells.
And with the tannin, I'm assuming thick skin.
It depends on the year. I've seen some years where we've had it's all small, uniformly small berries and fairly thick skins. It does have a lot of people have different terms for it. Has that kind of slip skin effect where the pulp just pops out once you destem it. So it can have that effect too, where and so it just depends. And I've also seen years. I think this year was a good example of it, where you'll have both large berries and small berries on the same bunch, and it's just not uniform at all from a berry size. And but sometimes I think that actually adds to the complexity, because you get this sort of slightly less ripe and slightly more ripe berry on the same cluster. And for me, what I've found is if we can catch that window where it's a little bit earlier, you get more black pepper characteristics out of that.
Okay.
So yeah, where I see that kind of mixed or non-uniform berry size, I'm also sometimes seeing a little bit more black pepper characteristics. That could just be me wanting to see what I want to see there. But you know, there's years where it's very much just dark fruit and there's not as much pepper. But yeah, no, it's really interesting.
Do you think it has to do with the heat? Like if on a hot growing season, maybe there's less pepper, more pepper? Did you ever?
I think that can be part of it. Absolutely. I think, for example, in 19, we did see a pretty decent amount of pepper out there. And also one of my favorite parts of Graciano, not only as a grape, but also just walking out in the vineyard and checking on the vines. It's one of the few varieties I've actually experienced that you can smell. You can smell either the fruit or the stems, because they also have a very peppery black pepper quality to them. And you can smell it as you're walking through the vineyard. And usually once they get a little bit more ripe. I think in 19 it was a little bit more of a moderate growing season. It was a little bit cooler, and so the vine or the stems got a little bit riper before we were harvesting them, and a little bit more hang time. And so a lot of that was getting concentrated. So yeah, I think temperature can have an effect, but mostly in that it's really affecting with the harvest period. You know, how long we're hanging it, you know, later or not as late. So yeah, it's a good question.
Anyway, and with that, what are some of the trials and tribulations of growing Graciano for you?
Trials and tribulations. One, like I said before, is it's one of those varieties, much like Merlot, where Lori and I were just talking about Merlot. You'll be watching it one day, it looks great, and you're like, I should probably harvest that, and then the next day you have a hot day and it's raisins. So it really can happen very, very quickly. As I think, because it can get quite dark. The darker the berry gets, the more susceptible to that kind of flash raisoning that can happen if there's a full exposure in the sun on a really hot day. So we'll see, you know, you'll see that line where maybe there was some leaves missing, and on a day that gets up to, you know, 98 to 100 degrees, because we definitely are getting those a lot more often here. Those can definitely we'll lose a lot of that fruit there on the side that's exposed to the sun. So those are things that we've had to learn. I've also had to learn to the clusters themselves can be quite large, but one of the most beautiful clusters for me, because even if it's really big, it's very loose, very, very loose cluster. So every berry has space in between it, and then all of the wings and shoulders are actually hanging very loosely on the cluster itself as well. So where you see, for example, with like Syrah, where they tend to be, they can be small or medium-sized berries, quite dense. Often the wings or the shoulders will want to, as they're hanging on the principal part of the rachis, they'll sort of just become one clump and just very dense and very hard to manage. And Graciano is very easy to get in there even later, maybe right before veraison. If you're timing it a little bit later, you can get in there and maybe cut off some weight from each individual cluster and give some room around and some space around each individual cluster as well. So it lends itself very well to some more specific farming practices and some that higher level of attention to detail, if you have the money and will to do so. But it's again, and I think also because it's such a loose cluster, you get it helps with preventing mildew issues in the vineyard, because again, we are farming organically, so mildew is definitely something we're keeping an eye out for. So if there's air in the canopy, there's usually going to be air around the grapes as well, and so it's not as susceptible, I would say, necessarily to powdery mildew than like Mourvedre would be. And even though they seem fairly related or closely, they seem very similar in some ways. And then also just it gives that very even ripening, just because there is all of that that air around the clusters, around the berries. You get a very even veraison, and I think that helps with giving us the color that we hope for in the Graciano.
Now, do we know who the parents are?
I for this, I tried to do some extra research and pin it down. It seems to me that unless either of you found it, it seems to me that it's very much a Spanish variety, and it's been in Spain for a very, very long time. There seems to be a lot of evidence that there are sisters and brothers and children of Graciano, but finding the parents maybe
has not been.
Yeah. And
I guess they don't want to be found.
It may never be found. I mean, if you think about it, it could be a variety that no longer exists, and we're only going to be able to find it through the other similar varieties or clones that are out there. Because I was looking up what is it, Bovale out of Sardinia. There's trying to think some of those synonyms that we have for Graciano.
Does have a lot. Yeah, does have a lot.
And they're finding that a lot of those are actually the same grape. Even that maybe, especially the Sardinian or the clones that are similar are maybe just, again, slightly different clones, but they're all coming from a very similar grape. Hence all of the synonyms. It makes sense. And it's amazing that even back then they had so many names for these things, because they tasted the same, and they were realizing that there were similarities, and must have had great palates back then too. So
right.
We really don't see a lot of Graciano. Is it grown besides Spain? I know it's grown in Spain. Is it grown a lot in California? Is it grown anywhere else?
It's definitely, I think it's definitely making its way around the world. I know that in France we're starting to see some stuff pop up there, in the Languedoc region, especially Argentina, I think, which makes a lot of sense. Argentina is really playing around with some great varieties for their climate. Like I said, I was doing some research, and I was talking with one of the Andrew Jones, the salesperson for Sunridge Nurseries, and he actually said that I could use some of his information that he provided for us from Sunridge. And back before, so again, it was imported by not by Sunridge, but by I think a company called Planzel. And so since Sunridge was the only licensed propagator for this one clone, the one that we have, and I think one of the largest propagated clones of Graciano in California now. Before they found out that they did the genetic testing that this wasn't Mourvedre, but again, we could talk about that more, and it was Graciano, they had already sold about 450,000 vines into California, which is based on an average vines per acre. Could be over 300 acres were planted in a pretty short period of time, and so somewhere out there, and there's that many acreage, and also they're still doing about 20 to 50,000 vines a year. Wow. So I think what I actually asked him, I said, are you seeing greater demand for these vines now that we're kind of Graciano seems to be taking off, at least here in Paso Robles. And I think his suggestion was, once people kind of figured out whether Graciano was going to sell or not, or whether we could, whether we could actually sell it to our customers and help educate them on what we're trying to do with it. They realized that the love for Graciano was there, and so we just went for it. And I think there's many wineries, especially here in Paso Robles, but in Lodi, Santa Barbara County, Santa Ynez.
Okay.
There's Graciano all over California as well. So I think we'll probably see a lot more get planted here in the near future.
So you've kind of hinted at it a couple of times or whatever, and I'm not really sure who came up with this term for it. It might be Adam Montiel, and if it's not him, I apologize to the person who did it. But the Graciano goof of Paso.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of think it was Adam, but I'm not 100% sure. So this whole Graciano goof that occurred in Paso. So can you kind of go into it? I think it's hysterical, and then I'll do my little spiel of what I think kind of some wineries are still doing. But go ahead.
Right. So I guess just to start from the beginning, Jada planted 2 different clones of Mourvèdre on the property here, and one of them was called 571 Monastrell. Monastrell being a synonym for Mourvèdre or Mourvèdre, and again that was through this nursery because it was sold to them as a clone of Mourvèdre, but as 571 clone or Monastrell. We're not sure how the confusion happened. I know there's another synonym of Graciano called Moristel, which is very similar, and there could have been confusion as to what it was there.
R can look like an N.
Exactly. So exactly. You never know. Maybe it was a doctor writing the writing the tag. So you never know. And so anyways, a lot of us, especially here in Paso Robles, had been working with this 571 Monastrell clone of Mourvèdre for many years, probably I would say over 10 years. And I'm not sure if it was coincidental or if it was Justin Smith of Saxum who was the first to kind of say, hey, can we look at this a little bit closer? And because I know his story is Justin Smith was comparing that 571 clone and then some of his other clones of Mourvèdre or Motaro, and realizing it didn't really make sense because most of the clones should be morphologically similar enough that you can tell them say that they're pretty similar if not the same variety. So I think he sent it off for genetic testing, and it came back that it was a clone of Graciano. So I think, and then contacted the nursery, and they were like, "Yep, okay, sounds good." And so that's when you'll see it from Jada. We went from in 2017 was the last year that we had Mourvèdre on the label, and it was and immediately changed over to Graciano the following years.
Did you bottle that as a single varietal? Or was it a blend? Did you use that grape to blend?
As a blend, yeah, as a blend.
Okay.
So for example, this Hell's Kitchen would have been a true GSM back in 2017 and before. But we had been using it and that's the fascinating part of this. We've been using it in place of Mourvèdre, this whole time because they have similarities in profile. I mean, they can be earthy, they can be spicy. Sometimes you get this kind of mushroomy quality to it. But for me, I actually prefer it. I think it does. It performs extremely well in our microclimate here in the Willow Creek district, especially, but not just in Paso in general. Has a little bit more acidity, doesn't quite reach that same high pH that Mourvèdre can often get to later in the season. So acidity is a big one, and then again, like the tannin isn't quite as significantly, high as sometimes you see with the other varieties. So, So yeah, we've been very happy with it. And I think just kind of again pushing it and educating our customers and how we're using it, and I'm really positive on seeing that this is being a variety that's gonna move forward with any changes we're gonna see in the climate in the future.
Yeah. So I think didn't Justin Smith see like it had gold, like the edges
Yeah.
of the leaves were a little bit gold, and Mourvedre doesn't have that, or I have it reversed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm actually I'm color deficient or colorblind or whatever
Oh,
it is.
okay.
So like visual cues from color perspective aren't something that I normally remember
Okay.
very well. But the leaf shape is similar. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I think it just had like the edge of the leaf of Graciano, of
yes,
Mourvedre. Of Graciano has a gold like on the edge of the leaf.
right,
And as
right.
Justice Smith was walking by, he's like, that's not right. That's
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like Mourvedre should have like this like distinct bronzy. I
yeah,
can't remember what it is. And then
yeah.
and it just didn't.
It did
So
it. Right.
um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
so that was a big one. And then also when you look at them now, I mean, now that we know, what it is. If you look at even at the clusters, they're quite different. I would say Graciano is more, how I describe the clusters being loose and still pretty big cluster, but loose and small but fairly uniform berries. I think Mourvedre often is just a little bit more dense of a cluster. But yeah, again, it's you usually think that maybe that's a soil thing, that's a rootstock thing, that's causing that, or a farming technique. And so yeah, it'd be really hard to convince yourself without really looking at the whole picture.
Right. When you're being told it's something, it's easy to convince
Oh,
yourself
so easy,
that
yeah.
it is that, right?
Exactly.
I was in Jumilla, and I was telling them about this, in Paso, and they're like, "Really?" They thought it was the same thing. They're so different, but like, I'm like, yeah, but we're not. This is your grape,
Yeah, yeah. No, exactly. We were learning about it, and we're still learning here in Paso Robles which varieties are more suited to which areas, and yeah, I mean that was a happy mistake is what I call it. And yeah, something. I mean, again, we're not looking back. That's for sure. We're looking forward when it comes to Graciano.
Now, I don't know. I also hear that there are some wineries that are still going by Mourvedre.
I don't know. Sorry, there's a fly flying around me, but I understand that completely. It's really tough to, especially I can be a purist, or not even a purist, but I can be a data guy sometimes, and we track everything down to the half gallon or whatever, and our percentages we try to be very precise with. So yeah, unless someone comes out and tells me this is what you should call it, I totally get that. And we had to have an internal discussion on it too. What are we going to do, because we can no longer call this a GSM, and GSM sounds way sexier than GSG or SGG. Right. It's a harder sell, and GSMs have been, to be fair, growing in popularity, but only because it's taken some time for customers buying GSMs in the stores to understand what it is, why that blend is different than any other blend. So that has taken some time, and then all of a sudden we're handed this. You can't you can't call it that now because it doesn't make sense. So yeah, we embraced it. I know there's definitely probably more, at least that I know here in Paso Robles, that have embraced it than those that have not. And some of those are the top wineries, including Saxon, like we talked about, Turtle Rock, Torrin. I mean, they're all fantastic wineries that are using Graciano and calling it what it is. So
right.
So you talked about how you co-ferment for Hell's Kitchen. Do you co-ferment anything else that you produce?
Yeah, yes.
You do a lot?
Is the answer. We do a lot of co-fermentation, and we use a lot of we use a lot of phenolic analysis in the vineyard, and so we're checking color, we're checking tannin in the vineyard. It's not a perfect solution, so it's just another tool that we use out there. We're also doing a lot of tasting, a lot of just using visual aspects to make these decisions. But often there's years, for example, Lauren and I were talking about Merlot. There's years where the flavor is just striking and wonderful, but maybe we're not getting quite the color, quite the structure. We're not going to get that mid palate density that we're looking for. So we'll throw in 5% of Cabernet or 5% of Petit Verdot, depending on the vintage, and co-ferment those together. And what you end up getting, in my opinion, is you still get a Merlot that tastes distinctly Merlot, but you're getting that supporting grape is coming in early and incorporating really early, and is helping lift that other variety up. So yeah, we do a lot of that with our Bordeaux blends that we have, but on the Rhone side as well. I'm trying to think. We also have Tannat on the property, so we're actually doing Syrah and Tannat co-fermentations too. One of my favorites, I haven't done it lately because it's a bit risky and it just worked out. But in 2017, we did one co-fermentation, one tank of Syrah, Graciano, and Tannat. And it was probably one of my favorite wines that we had ever made.
That's interesting.
Yeah, just super dark, earthy, spicy, again, very polarizing. So one of those wines that we'll get customers who are like, I don't like that. and that's great. That's totally fine because I get it. It's, especially when we're like, it's meaty, it's earthy, it's leathery, it's got some tar in there. That doesn't sound appealing to some people, and I totally understand that.
But you'll have other people who buy it by the caseload.
Oh, absolutely. We have people who we had some customers who I'm trying to remember where. Oh, they were from, their family was in Armenia, and they took it all the way back to Armenia to their family because they loved it so much. And I was like, that's the stories that keep us making these kinds of wines. So, so we always are trying new things, and that SGT, that single co-fermentation that we ended up bottling, the idea was that was going to go into the Hell's Kitchen, and that was going to be a component of the Hell's Kitchen. But this was the best way to do it. We wanted it was a small pick of Syrah, Graciano, and Tannat off the tops of all of our little hills, and that were ripening at the same time. But we didn't want to pick all of it at once because some of it would be not as ripe as we'd like it to be. So we did these small picks, and we did some whole cluster on the Graciano because I love that peppery quality, that extra peppery and floral quality you get from the whole cluster. And yeah, it just ended up being a beautiful, beautiful wine. So yeah, we use Graciano all over the place. You'll see it ends up like we talked about our Jersey Girl, our Hell's Kitchen. It even ends up in, we'll do that Syrah Graciano co-fermentation I talked about. We do what's called our Sawbones blend, which is a Cab Syrah blend. And often it's Cabernet, Syrah, and then there's a little bit of Graciano in there. And again, it's not planned. It's from that co-fermentation that we're doing starting in the vineyard.
And then you also like to play with your fermenting vessels. You have a lot of vessels.
Yes. Yeah. We have a mixture of closed top tanks. We have open top tanks. We have the T-bins, the 1.5 ton T-bins, which for us, because we're mostly stainless steel tanks, can get moved around a lot, throughout the cellar. We're pretty small here and not a lot of space, but those are great for testing those co-fermentations. Let's say it's something that we think is maybe a little bit more risky, but we can do a small scale version of that. And open tops are great because you can control them a little bit more. You can manipulate them a little bit more if you want to do more punch downs or less punch downs. And especially a whole cluster, like we were talking about. We'll do, especially in the open tops, we'll do a lot more whole cluster in those because you have some options there, as opposed to once you put it in a closed top tank, it's kind of you're kind of done from there. So Yeah, and then I have not yet experienced. I have in the past, but not here at Jada. I haven't done a lot of like barrel fermentations. It's something that we've looked into doing, but for me, the most important part is just learning. I feel like you can't learn enough about what you're getting out of the vineyard, and testing those co-fermentations as opposed to trying to control some of that tannin and oak integration. But that being said, we do a lot of things that are very similar. You know, we get our wines on oak early. We do blending very early, so we make up for it in those ways.
I was doing some research on food.
I can't believe you're going to ask this question, Deb. I can't.
I love, Laura, that you know this.
So
okay.
One of the things I read, and
yes.
it said that it paired well.
Is this about me? Is this about me?
No.
It paired well with seared kangaroo with raspberry glaze. I was just like, oh.
Wait, you don't eat that every Saturday? That's not your.
No, it's my Sunday dinner. It's my Sunday dinner.
It's Sunday. Okay.
Seared kangaroo.
It said seared kangaroo with a raspberry glaze, and yeah. I'm like, okay, I have no idea what kangaroo tastes like. So, what do you pair? What's a good pairing for Graciano? And what is your favorite pairing with it?
I'm going to make some assumptions here because I should have asked my Australian friends on this one.
Right.
I'm going to make some assumptions that kangaroo is on the gamey side.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah, a little bit leaner, a little bit gamier. I think Graciano is a fantastic food pairing wine. I think because the tannin integration is so great, the balance is so great. I found that it's very versatile. Whatever you pair it with, it's not necessarily bad. I'll put it this way. The wine's not going to mask anything that you're eating. It's going to, whatever you're eating is going to lift a different aspect from the Graciano out. And, but I love pairing it with things that are a little bit, maybe have a little more heat. Whereas, with something like Merlot, you're not going to do a lot of spicy or like hot, spicy stuff. Mm-hmm. Anything that brings out that black pepper in the food is going to pair well with the black pepper that's naturally in that wine. But I do also get the sort of fruit reduction sauce as well, because you can get this broad, almost rich, sweet, dark fruit off of the Graciano. And I think, again, you're just going to lift that up in the wine. So that makes a lot of sense to me. To me, lamb is a great pairing with Graciano. Anything that's kind of got more wild or more fragrant spices like Moroccan dishes as well. That works really well. And also I just had it with, just because this is closer to home. My fiance is kind of stays away from gluten and from dairy a lot. So we had it with a spicy, we had this Hell's Kitchen actually with it was a spicy, like Italian sauce, but on a cauliflower gnocchi, and it worked totally well.
The fried diavolo or whatever. Don't they call it?
Was that, sorry?
Fried diavolo or something, the spicy tomato sauce.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was.
Arrabbiata. No, isn't fried diavolo like seafood stuff? Isn't arrabbiata? Like, are you thinking?
Yeah, it was more like an arrabbiata. Yeah, I would say it's more like that. Exactly. So, and for me,
I can see that.
Yeah, because that is a little bit on the hotter but spicy side, and for me, it paired perfectly, because it didn't. I was expecting kind of the tomato-based sauce to maybe mask or not really hold up to the wine, or the wine not to hold up to it, and no, I was very pleasantly surprised. But yeah, I think it works really well with the gamey dishes. On the seafood side, don't be afraid to go with the more blackened version. Again, add those spices, add those, just kind of a little bit more powerful and pungent aromatics are going to pair perfectly with this wine.
And
kangaroo, apparently.
Kangaroo, apparently.
Kangaroo. I saw that. I'm like, oh my gosh.
And Michael says he pairs 100% Graciano with marinated and seared barbecue tri-tip.
Oh, see, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Absolutely. Marinated and seared. Yeah, see, for me, well, and again, I love like a good sear on anything really, but I think when you get those more like charcoaly, but like, almost, I don't want to say like tar, but you get that characteristic when you draw that out of the meat. That Graciano just does really well with that.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And talking Graciano and sharing a Hell's Kitchen with us. And I just want to make sure everybody knows how to find Jada, because I can't drive everybody to your winery. I'll do it as often as I can, Jeff, but I can't drive everybody there. So how do people find Jada?
You're not gonna start a limo service as well, only dedicated to Jada.
There you go.
Yeah. No, like I said, we're mostly through the taste room. We love the opportunity to talk with our customers and explain our wines person to person and face to face. So you can find our wines here at Jada. We're off of Vineyard Drive on the west side of Paso Robles. I would say we're about 15 minutes from the 101. For those who are touring the coast, we're about 20 minutes from Cambria and in Cayucas. So great location. You can find us. You can purchase our wines online at www.jadavineyard.com. And I had to remember that one. and also I always forget our social media, but if you look up Jada Wines or Jada Vineyard, you'll find us right away. And that'll point you in the right direction. I don't have a list yet of where you can find us out in the world. We're getting close to being able to put together a list like that. We are, like I said, we're at a few selections of restaurants in Colorado now. Arizona, and then as Lori and I were talking about earlier, we just got distribution somehow for the first time into New York. So
wow,
yeah. So it's something we've been working towards, because again, we have the Hell's Kitchen and the Jersey Girl, and I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people over there. We have the story behind it too. As well. So, but right now I can't tell, keep an eye open as well. I'll say if you're at a restaurant and see.
I will look for it.
Yeah.
So I actually I had to stop myself from drinking so I could save just a little bit to raise a glass at the end and say thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And sharing all of your information, sharing Graciano and Hell's Kitchen with us. And so raise a glass again. Slancha, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
For having me on. This was fun.
That was no brandy, that was no malt.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoyt-Budd. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com and sign up for my newsletter at exploringthewineglass.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Podcast music is Wine by Kevitz. Until next week, Slancha.
There is always time for a good glass of wine. I want a nice glass right now.